Welcome back, everyone, and welcome, Sarah.
Hi, thank you, Sally.
So glad you're here today. I think that, especially with your background, I know this is this is sort of technical in some ways, the topic of what to do after your apps are in, but I think we're hitting some of the emotional cues too. So I always love your take on these things. So let's start though with the technical of what to do now. Once you've submitted all your applications, what do you want to do next?
Yeah. So first thing, once applications are all submitted, is the logistical management of first, make sure that between now and when you hear from a college, students, you are obsessively checking your email. Email, I know, is becoming a little bit out of date with, text messaging and instant communication, but that is how colleges communicate, the vast majority. Usually within about 2 or 3 business days after hitting submit on an application, a student will receive an email saying, "We received your application," along with instructions for most colleges on how to set up a login for a portal. The portal is where most colleges have their own login where you check the status of your application. So have they received your school's transcripts and letters of recommendation? Is your application complete or incomplete? They often also have information in there if financial aid forms are needed. So you're checking your status of everything. That same portal is where, let's say you're hearing back in mid-March, whether or not you're admitted is where you'll go in, usually to see. So check your email, follow the instructions. If the college uses the portal system, get it all set up and ready to go, and verify that your application's complete. Do not stress if your application is not listed as complete until a few days after the application deadline. There's a human processing that happens with all of this, believe it or not. It's not 100% technology. That they have to import things from the application source, from the testing agency, et cetera. So it can take a few days to catch up, especially with those January 1st deadlines, which are when offices are closed for a holiday. So give it a few days for things to process.
Yeah, it's true. Do not panic if it takes a couple weeks, but be on top of it when they do get in touch with you. And I think that's why checking your email is a good idea too. You don't want to go on that portal every single day.
Yeah.
Like I want to caution diligence, but not panic. You know what I mean?
Yes, it's a fine line.
Yeah, exactly. So checking the email is good because they'll pretty much always email you as well as having it on the portal, unless
Correct.
they say otherwise. So
Correct.
Yeah.
One other silly detail that might sound tiny, but I find for students I work with is actually substantial, is I think it's really helpful to create a email folder or flag if you use Gmail for each college you're applying to, so that you can flag or sort things by school to stay organized. I was in a meeting with a student recently. We did a screen share, realized he had thousands upon thousands of emails in his inbox with no systems.
Right.
And I think that's common practice now, but it's an easy way to accidentally miss something.
Yeah, for sure. Almost impossible to keep track in that situation. So
Yep.
yeah, I love your solution. I think that's a really good one. All right, what else is important at this point?
Yeah. So a couple things. Earlier, Sally, you mentioned emotional pieces. I'll share with the audience that not only am I a past college admissions officer, but I'm a social worker. I have my master's in social work. So I'm always thinking both about the admissions piece, but the well-being of the student. And here's one area where Sally and I were chatting to prepare, and there's a fine line. On the logistics and college standpoint, we encourage students to keep their grades up. And there are 2 reasons now that matters to keep your grades up in senior year. One is that for many colleges, when students apply regular decision, your high school counselor will be sending an updated school transcript for your first semester grades, usually by the end of January or early February. The other is that once you've been admitted to colleges, you pay your deposit, you decide where you're going, your high school has to submit a final high school transcript. Usually this happens in June or July, saying that yes, this student graduated and here are their grades. And although for most colleges, it's not that big a deal if a grade or 2 slips a little bit, if they see a concerning red flag, it could mean that worst case scenario, the offer of admission is rescinded because they say, ooh, this isn't the student who applied to our college. This isn't what we were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it's not that severe. I've worked at colleges where the student has to have a one-on-one with the dean or vice president of admission and talk about what happened. What did they
Mm-hmm.
learn? But absolutely, you want to avoid that situation. So
Mm-hmm.
keep grades up, but at the same time, be present in senior year. Try to have some fun. Spend time with your family and friends, knowing that come next fall, whether you're going to college across town or across the country, a big transition or change is coming. And try to have some fun because the last few months have been intense getting these applications in.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I do want to stress too, if something happens when it comes to your grades or something like that, also know that you can reach out to the admission office proactively. An example that I would give, and at University of Chicago, there was a student, he'd been a great student and suddenly his grades slipped. And I mean, we thought this kid was great. Like he was wonderful. So we actually reached out to him and he kind of hemmed and hawed. And then he told us that he had come out as gay, and in the
Mhm.
fairly small town where he was in upstate Wisconsin, he had not been treated well. And we were like, of course we're going to cut you slack for that, we're
Yep.
like, please come to Chicago where nobody cares. Like, it's not going to be, you know what I mean? I mean, I guess we can't promise nobody, but please come to Chicago. And he, you know what, he came to University of Chicago, he became one of our tour guides, and we loved him. But
Yeah.
we had to pull him in to find out what was going on. But if
Mhm.
he had just proactively called us or something like that, then we wouldn't have even, I mean, we were absolutely sympathetic. So I do want to let people know that we are there to be, admission officers are there to be humane, but you've got to have, but don't just slack, because
Mhm.
that's not the same thing.
Mhm. And I think what you just implied too is be proactive in communicating. The admissions officers generally want to know the why behind the story.
Mm-hmm.
They're not mind readers. So
Mm-hmm.
if something comes up where a grade is sliding, you need to drop or change a course, proactively telling the office of admission and telling them the why behind can
Mm-hmm.
really help so that they're not trying to guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, one time I had a student who wanted to drop physics and he was already admitted to his college of choice. And I said, if your college says fine, then I say fine. So he
Mhm.
called them in the office with me. They said, we don't care. And I said, okay, great. You can drop it. I'll sign
Yep.
off on it.
Yep.
So yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
All right. And then what else? And we talked about finances already, but one that you and I discussed earlier was talking about how much this is going to cost. You've got a big expense coming up, and especially
Yeah.
if this is the oldest child or the only child, that
Mhm.
might not have been discussed before, might not have been dealt with.
Mhm. Yeah. So I always think about this when I was working at Lewis and Clark. This young man was crying in an admitted student open house because his parents shared once there that they couldn't afford it, and it just pulled at my heartstrings.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would say is that I think that now, while families wait a few months to hear back from colleges, it's a healthy and good time to sit down, parents or guardians, with your student and have whatever in your family feels appropriate an open conversation, if you haven't already, about the role cost could play and to what extent in terms of which college the student ends up choosing. I
Mm-hmm.
think that, I'm a mom. I always want the best in the world for my child, but there are pragmatic limitations
Mm-hmm.
financially, logistically, whatever that might be. And granted, I have a, preschooler, not a high schooler, but
Mm-hmm.
it's my job to help set up for realistic expectations and support. And finances can be a hard one to do it, but I think that sometimes parents think, sure, apply to your dream school, but they haven't really thought about, ooh, what if I have to turn down this dream for my student? So I
Mm-hmm.
think having a conversation now to set the stage that cost might be a factor for our family in deciding which colleges we can have you attend. Let's have a conversation about whether or not you'll take out student loans, what this looks like, so that when all the options for both admission, scholarships, loans are on the table in March or April, it isn't as much of a surprise if finances are part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I can't stress that enough. I mean, honestly, I would recommend doing it even earlier, but do it now if you haven't already. Just
Yep.
say, this is what might be possible. I'm all in for you. I hope this will happen. This is not me not being supportive, but you need to also get excited about the in-state public option
Yep.
just in case. So,
Or, a school you might think of as a safety that's a private college that has great merit scholarships. Think about these things. Sometimes the schools that are easier for you to be admitted to on your list can be a financial gem. So
yeah, absolutely.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So speaking of, you talked about schools that are safeties on the list. I
Mhm.
always really recommend that, especially for students who are applying to schools that are big reaches. Okay, you did it, you applied to this big reach and you didn't get in. You have
Mhm.
other big reaches, but you know the odds are against you, not because you're not a great student, but because these are admit rates of 5%, 10%. It's just simply the odds are just very poor. Straight numbers, not personal to you, right?
Yep.
So get excited about your non-reach schools as well.
Yep. And I think one thing that's an action item that can be taken at this point is a lot of students I work with, they pick their what we might call safety or target schools, but maybe they put less time into researching them as they do into their reach schools. And
Mhm.
so right now can be a good time to hang out on the college's social media sites, their websites, take a look and get excited so that you can be thinking about if those are some of your most compelling or only options on the table come spring. What is it that you like about these institutions?
Mhm.
And hopefully you already know a few of those things, but you might not. You may have been busy and just getting these applications in. So I think spending some time researching and deciding what it is you like about them can be really helpful when the admissions decisions come out.
Mhm.
Definitely.
I would also say that for students who've applied to lots of colleges and just kind of, it's not something we advise. I usually don't advise more than 12, but I still have students who apply to 20, 30, and some of those students have no idea what they're going to do
Yeah.
when the time comes. And then what should be a pretty joyous time because they've gotten
Mhm.
into some wonderful options ends up being extremely stressful for them. So I think that's another reason to kind of dig into your list and kind of think like, what are some of my priorities? Again, not just in terms of if I get into an Ivy, I'll go there, but of these targets, of these safeties,
Mhm.
like are there some that I like more than others? Yeah,
Yep.
spending that research will help you make those choices down the road too.
Yep. You remind me when I worked at Northeastern, I met a young man who had been admitted to 20 colleges and universities, including Northeastern, which is a
Mhm.
selective school. And it was paralysis of indecision. He was incredibly overwhelmed. And so I think you are exactly right, especially for students who have applied to longer lists of schools, have a healthy number of those kind of target and safeties, that they have a healthy idea of which ones have compelling hooks. Is
Mhm.
there something that you specifically like at specific campuses and offerings? Because it sounds like perhaps an embarrassment of riches to be admitted to lots of colleges, but in these days where students are often applying to lots more schools than we might advise, it happens
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. Northeastern's a perfect example. I was talking to a young woman who hadn't gotten into for reach schools. Northeastern obviously wasn't a safety. It isn't really for
Mhm.
most students anymore.
No.
But it was kind of a high target. And she didn't know about the co-op program. And I was like, how
Mhm.
do you not know about the co-op program? That's like such a
Mhm.
distinguishing factor. And I told her about it. And she said, I'm so glad I talked to you. I've been so excited about getting to work. And this thought that I can get to work so early
Yep.
is like she wanted that very hands-on as opposed to more theoretical education. And I thought, well, Northeastern sounds perfect for you. Frankly, it sounds better than these other schools that you didn't get into. And she
Mhm.
didn't know. I thought, how do you not know? You must have only found out it was in Boston and thought, great, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that's an
So,
example of what I call a hook with my students, right? So the co-op could be a hook, a phenomenal study abroad program, a city where you have an aunt that's going to cook meals for you, whatever that might be. But think about what those hooks might be. Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. That was great.
Of course. And as we wrap up, one final thought that you and I talked about, Sally, this summer, plan to do something fun. Go
Yeah.
backpacking, go travel, relax, whatever it is. You've worked so hard, students through high school, have some fun.
Absolutely. And that is a great place to end it. All right. So we have some great shows coming up for our January 6th show. We'll be talking about summer programs, and Beth Heaton will also be answering listener questions with our regular finance contributor, Shannon Vasconcelos. Remember, too, that you don't need to listen to our shows live. Every show is accessible 24/7 on the Voice America website. You can download every show for free on iTunes. If you want to search for a particular show topic, please go to our blog page at blog.getintocollege.com. And last, do not forget, we're here every Thursday, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific.